Welcome to the Console Crusade podcast. Here we talk video game news, retro games, and never count Olaf's most recent disguise. I am EJ Olson, and joining me today for the fifth time in 2 weeks to, for some reason, talk Nintendo is my esteemed colleague Nick Durheim. How doth you fare this evening, sir?
Don't talk like that. You've never spoken that way.
I'm trying something new. I'm mixing it up.
I don't like it. But yeah, there has been a glut of Nintendo news and literally nothing else.
I mean, it's January, dude. It's usually extremely slow in January as we ramp up to spring. Spring's the new fall, you know, when it comes to video game releases. But everything that's happening in spring, we heard about last fall. So it's pretty slow. But we have a few things we want to talk about. Transition. I'm going to cut this out.
No, you should probably keep that. That's a good tune.
I think the biggest thing that happened today was the Fire Emblem Direct from Nintendo.
Correct.
But I don't want to get to that quite yet. All right? A couple things we want to mention. Minor things that has happened in the world of video games since we last spoke. There was a report from a company called Superdata, I think. Is that right? Superdata? And came out and confirmed that the Xbox has only sold 26 million units to PS4's 55 million.
That's a lot less than I thought. I'd heard numbers floating around about 30 as of like September last year, but 26?
26.
Man, and people give shit for Wii U selling 13.
Only 13 million. And to be fair, that's not a very big number.
Only twice as much.
Yeah. I mean, the PS4 is selling exceptionally well. This is, I don't want to say unprecedented, but given like the current climate and hardware sales in the last decade.
Yeah, they're absolutely dominating. We haven't seen anything like this since, I don't know, Wii.
Well, unfortunately, I don't think they're going to live to see 100 million units. I know I had speculated previously that I think they could. But this console generation is ending next year, whether Sony wants it to or not. The Scorpio is going to come out. It's going to be competitive, and it's going to be exponentially stronger. I have no doubt.
It'll be competitive, like power-wise, but I think it's more dependent on the pricing and the messaging and the advertising that Microsoft puts behind their new hardware.
That's true. There are a lot of things that could go wrong, as we've seen.
Like Xbox One sold way worse than the PS4, probably because of the price alone, because they had to bundle and connect and be really weird, try to be that media box.
You know, I think there are probably quite a number of factors that went into the Xbox One failing. And I think failure is probably an appropriate term, especially when you consider that like the whole idea of a console generation is like we've got the console twins going head to head, right? Sony has they don't even think about Microsoft anymore at this point based on those numbers. But I think the Xbox probably failed the price was a huge point. At $100 more for a console that was substantially weaker, I think.
Yeah, it's been pretty shaky. It kind of reminds me of how when the PS3 came out. Like, I would be interested to see what the first 3 years of the 360 and the PS3 were like in comparison to the current generation.
I think they had opposite problems, though. You know, the PS3, Sony came out and wanted to sort of position this thing as like the ultimate, you know, premium experience, right? It was just a boutique item.
But it was also like a glut of things that people didn't necessarily want, and then they're charging them for it. You know, Blu-ray hadn't really taken off yet, so like the people who did buy a PS3 were buying a $600 Blu-ray player.
Didn't it have a CF card reader? Or am I crazy? Am I imagining that?
Oh my god, they would, wouldn't they? That's so 2006 Sony. That's ridiculous if that's true. Pretty sure it had an SD card reader, which the Wii also had, but that's not a knock against it.
Okay, I might be crazy. I know it had an SD card reader initially.
It had like 5 USB ports or something stupid. Had the entirety of a PS2 inside of it.
But you know, that came down to branding and messaging and price. But the features were there. The Xbox had the opposite problem. They marketed this thing as, hey, we've got Netflix and you can plug your cable box into this thing and control it with your voice. Like, cool. Like no one, that's like a quality of life thing. That's not the hill you die on.
It's the price. Really what it boils down to from just a consumer perspective that isn't like in the know of what the Xbox One's power is versus the PS4's power.
To an extent. But again, had the Xbox been like a substantial, more powerful, or more, you know, feature dense, if it was a more robust system than the PS4, $100 is negligible. For a lot of people who were buying these things. But the fact that it was weaker, you had to pay for Xbox Live Gold to use things like Netflix and Hulu. Their free game program is not as robust as PlayStation's.
It's comparable, though.
It now is. It wasn't comparable. They finally caught up. They've dropped some of those weird paywalls And
I didn't realize that the games with gold was a more recent, the way it looks.
Even now that the prices are comparable across the board, PS4 is running games at 1080p and Xbox One struggles to hit 900p for a lot of these titles. I know power isn't everything. Like, look at the Switch, right? Games can look beautiful and run well enough on weak hardware. It's not all about numbers, but when we're talking identical experiences as far as gameplay, and you're getting something that looks worse, it looks and runs worse, like, easy decision. But yeah, price $500 at launch. $500, and all of those launch games were coming to Xbox 360. Almost all of them.
Well, they're also coming to PS3 too.
Well, initially, I don't think there was going to be a lot of people jumping ship, right? I think if you were an Xbox fanboy, you stayed within that ecosystem, or at least wanted to. And then after the whole thing with the always online and you have to be connected to the internet or else you're shut out of your Xbox, that whole travesty and DRM and whatever, like, that kind of got people thinking, like, ooh, maybe I'm switching to Sony this generation. And that was the scuttlebutt. That's what I heard from, our own little echo chamber. Our friends all said, fuck Xbox, I'm going to PlayStation this gen.
Yeah, it doesn't help that the exclusives, which can really sell, like, one system or another, there wasn't really anything for Xbox until, Halo 5? That was, like, a year after, I think, because they're only on, like, a 3-year cycle. But, like, even that wasn't really, like, compelling enough. People weren't really as jazzed about Halo as they were like the past 2 releases from them. And then Gears didn't come out until just this last year, and that that sold really well. But there hasn't been a really strong reason for people to adopt the Xbox One over the PS4, because they are so comparable, but the PS4 has much better exclusives.
Oh, far and away. That's the reason the PS3 made a comeback toward the end of its life, is they said, hey, we can only do what we can do, and that's make good games, and hope that sells the hardware. And it did. It worked out for them, And it doesn't help Xbox that all of their exclusive games are no longer exclusive. They all are coming to Windows 10. So people like me, who bought an Xbox One just for the Xbox exclusives and the future Xbox exclusives, right? I now have no need for that, because I can play a better version of it on my PC.
Yeah, and I wonder how much that has really affected the sales of those games in general, because I don't really think that there are as many like competent gaming PCs out there as there are gaming consoles. I still think that that's like a niche thing, and when you buy into a gaming PC, you are the one that's willing to spend, $800 or more to get a much better experience than you would if you bought a $400 box. So I don't know what the install base is like on Windows 10 users that are doing those, cross-buy or play anywhere type things that Microsoft is doing now. Like, even with third-party games, like Resident Evil 7 is coming out, and that's going to be a play anywhere game. So if you buy that game on Xbox One, you can also play it on Windows 10 with your same account. And I wonder what they're going to be doing with Scorpio. If Scorpio is going to be a gaming console as we think of it, or is it going to be more of a PC? And it's kind of like they're already kind of blurring the lines with like the architecture and the features. Like, these consoles are, media machines also, and they can do a lot of things that you can do with a PC, except you don't have a mouse and keyboard, essentially. I mean, isn't
Xbox One running Windows 10?
It's running a type of Windows 10. It's obviously not feature complete. So who knows? I mean, Microsoft, besides the Xbox, they're only recently getting into the hardware game with the Surface. And that's actually made like huge leaps and bounds forward to be like a competitor with the iPad. It's not as ubiquitous, but it's probably got better features. And I wonder what this means for Microsoft as a company, if they're actually going to be trying to stay in the hardware market, or if they're like, you know what, if we can just sell these same games, but on Windows 10, that's a lot cheaper on our back end and people are getting the same experience.
PCs and game consoles are totally becoming homogenized. Like, they are the same thing at this point.
Except you don't have to pay for online with a PC.
Exactly.
But, I mean, at the same time, you get what you pay for to an extent. Like, you do get those free games. You do get, better matchmaking than you might get with some, indie title that you have to do like some P2P shit that just doesn't work ever for some reason. Unless you like go to your settings and you open up a firewall port and like you do port forwarding, and it's just a big pain in the ass, and everything just kind of works on a console release.
Well, I would totally disagree with that. I don't think things work. Oftentimes things don't work. You just don't have options.
but not as bad as every. Have you ever paid attention to a PC release of any AAA game?
They're terrible.
It's never working until like 2 or 3 weeks after the fact.
I think video game consoles have a very important role to play when it comes to entertainment and in the video game landscape. Like, I think we need consoles, but again, Sony is doing it right, where they have all these like must-play exclusives, hit after hit after hit, and they make it exclusive and say, like, we are giving you a reason to buy our machine. You know, they're giving people a compelling reason to buy their hardware, and Microsoft, I think, has completely eliminated that. And again, I own Xbox and PS4. I probably won't be buying a Scorpio because games are no longer exclusive. You know, and my Xbox One, as it is it's not even a Blu-ray player. It's a piece of shit media player. It is garbage. There are audio sync issues, and Netflix has a perpetual hitch and stutter that they've addressed. I mean, I think they addressed it almost 2 years ago, and they haven't patched it. I mean, it's a garbage media player. My PS3 is my de facto Blu-ray player in the living room. The Xbox One just sits there, for the most part. Get with it, Microsoft. I don't know what they're going to do next. They obviously have the Scorpio. I think it's going to be a really powerful machine, but like I said, that's going to be a boutique item.
Yeah, I wonder who they're trying to sell it to. Because obviously there's only 26 million Xbox One users. They're not getting people to upgrade. And if they did, that would be such a small sales figure. They have to persuade people that have not owned the new hardware into buying this boutique item. I just don't understand how they're going to be able to sell that to people.
Yeah, I think they've come out and they've said several things that lead us to believe that, oh, this is more of a side grade, like the PS Pro. But
make it just a new generation then.
That's what they're doing.
If they did that, that would be such a kick in the pants for Sony. They would be left behind in a way that I think they would not be ready for.
But again, it's all about how powerful it actually be.
And if they can get people to develop for it and actually, utilize the hardware and make compelling games and compelling reasons for people to switch.
Switch?
Damn it. Can't get away with it.
You tried. That's what's interesting about video games right now is I think the last generation sort of spoiled people, not just consumers, but developers as well. Where we had this 10-year console generation almost. Right? Was it? I mean, it's technically still going, but from late 05 or was it early 06?
The 360 came out in 2005, and then the Wii and the PS3 came out in 2006.
So 8 years.
And then the PS3 and the Xbox One came out in 2013. So yeah, they had games coming out in 2015.
Right.
So that's like a 10-year generation.
10 years.
Definitely developers got used to the hardware. You saw the greatest games coming out later in the life cycle, like Halo 4 came out in 2012. And I bought that game, and that game looked fantastic. It utilized every inch of the 360's capabilities.
Right.
And I don't want hardware developers like Sony and Microsoft to like jump the gun and abandon this generation, because I really think that there are diminishing returns as far as power goes. I want this to be like another long console generation. I think that would be beneficial for players of the systems.
I think the current hardware is too underpowered, given where we are. And I know games don't look any better after a certain point. That's not true. We just don't see games develop to their full potential, knowing that we've got this hardware handicapping us as we develop these games. You know, if you see what a high-end, not like an insane machine, but just a high-end PC is actually capable of, there is still room for a meaningful upgrade. And obviously, we're never going to have the jump from 2D sprite-based graphics to polygon 3D environments. Like, we're never going to see that kind of jump again unless VR surprises everybody, which that doesn't look like that's headed that direction either. So we aren't going to have that, but there's still a lot of room for games to not only look much better, but run so much better. And now we've got 4K coming in. I know I'm not a fan of 4K. I think there's a place for it. I don't think it's my living room, at least not yet. You know, and Sony's trying to push that with the PS Pro, and it's a little early for that. But there's still a lot of room for growth. And like I said, the last generation spoiled consumers and developers. You know, that was an unusual generation. Generally, console generations lasted 4, maybe 5 years, you know, before a new machine came out. And I think it was the crash in 2008 sort of threw a kink in everybody's plans, and it just, you know, took that much longer to recover, and it pushed everything back a few years, and that's why we didn't get a new console until 13. And it's also, I think, part of the reason why those consoles weren't the biggest upgrades. You know, it was like they were behind on everything a couple of years. And I think that's why if Xbox does push this forward, it's going to be a freaking beast. but I almost guarantee it's going to be overpriced. The thing's going to be $700 or something.
Yeah, so why? You know, like, if they try and push this out and nobody buys it, then that's just going to, you know, scare developers away from trying to really take that power and utilize it into a meaningful way. But if everyone just waited a few years until everything was a lot cheaper, then we could have a meaningful upgrade, but also be a reasonable price. Because I'm not shelling out $500-$600 on a Scorpio if it's just like not even as powerful as my computer that I built.
Right.
You know, and people who bought a Xbox One or a PS4, they're not spending that much money on a console that has, you know, marginally better frame rate. Like, if you did a side by side, you could kind of tell the difference, but it's not meaningful. Like, PS4 definitely has a meaningful upgrade from the PS3. The Xbox One is definitely more powerful than the 360. And to get that kind of like side by side comparison and be able to tell, you're not going to be able to get that for a reasonable price.
And again, it comes down to hardware manufacturers wanting to profit on the things they produce, and
there's a whole line of profit.
Right, but it's, I don't know, some people subscribe to the idea that you take a loss on your hardware and you make it up with software. And I think you can do that. It's not as black and white as that. Like, if you say, oh, we're going to make an insanely powerful console, this is going to be a high-end gaming PC, we're going to sell it for $250, like, you're going to be losing a lot of money.
And Microsoft is sure as hell not doing that, especially after canceling games like Scalebound. You know, after putting tens of millions into a game and then it not like coming to fruition, you can't imagine that the guys at the head are like, you know what, well, how's it going in the Xbox realm? And they're like, oh, you know, we're just bleeding money. They're not going to get the go ahead to sell a console for, you know, they're not going to sell it at a loss.
And Microsoft has had some rough times with hardware. And, you know, Windows Phone, anyone? Go down that fucking hole.
Oh, the Zune.
The Zune. Your beloved Zune.
It was so fantastic. Rest in peace.
I know you got some good memories with the old Zune there. They're attempting, like you said earlier, to blur the lines between what a video game console is and what a home PC is and what an entertainment machine looks like. And they want to redefine what a video game generation even is. They're going to come in and they're going to release this really powerful system that'll still play all your Xbox One games and have this backwards compatibility built in. And instead of, you know, we saw it with the PlayStation Pro, maybe less clear-cut console generations, and we see these iterative upgrade cycles where things are getting incrementally more and more powerful. I don't think that's going to work as a business model. I don't think it is. I don't think consumers are ready for that. Think about it. Our friends essentially grew up in a world where their console generation lasted a decade. Our formative years were spent with this one machine. And then we were adults, and some people had kids, and they're still playing these same machines. That's kind of what we've come to expect, and that's just not how it's been if you look at the history of video games. This is like an experiment for them, right? They're trying to blur the lines, and they're trying to redefine how these things work and how we interact. And I don't know. I don't know if I buy it.
Yeah, I'm much more, not concerned, but I'm very intrigued to see what Microsoft does pushing forward software-wise, because if they do continue to blur that line, that would be cool, because I have Windows 10, and I have a computer that's definitely capable of playing Xbox games. So if I could, instead of buying the new hardware, if that is just like a boutique thing and to onboard people that don't necessarily have a gaming computer, I think that could be cool just to broaden their user base and be able to sell to more people.
So we have a couple of buddies who do a podcast called A Precipice Between Two Hills, and they were talking some smack. They called us out on their last episode. They said, the Console Crusaders, those guys don't even own consoles. They're PC gamers. We got to clear it up here. We got to clear the air, all right?
And I'll start off by saying that the current console generation is closer to a PC than anything else.
Right.
And that I've owned every single Nintendo console that they've ever made.
Right.
Except for the Virtual Boy.
And you're now officially a retro collector, motherfucker. You're on board.
Don't put me in that vaunted landscape.
I'm going to put you in that box, and I'm going to keep you under my bed.
I don't believe for a moment that you have storage space under your bed, because you've already got too many boxes of crap that you won't get rid of.
That's true, because I am a collector, and I hoard things, and I should probably get rid of some shit. But you've been bitten by the collector bug, man. You've been infected.
Don't say that. That sounds so dumb. The collector blood.
Whatever.
Welcome to the collector blood
So anyway,
podcast.
We're going to clear the air, all right? We both own high-end PCs, and we both play a lot of games on those PCs. And what I told Sir Maximus Bro, I mean, neither of us play any PC exclusive games. We're playing AAA titles that developed for consoles, and we were playing them with controllers. What I told Max is, these AAA multi-plat games, I want the most optimal experience. And if that means I play The Witcher 3 on my PC, that's what I'm going to do. But then there are games like Titanfall, where I said, hey, Titanfall runs at 60 frames a second, it looks beautiful on PS4, and I have multiplayer with my friends. I bought it on PS4. So, just gotta get that out there. I play a lot of games on PC. I'm playing a lot of my AAA titles on PC. But I'm essentially just playing it on a really powerful Xbox. On my couch, with a controller in my hand and my dick in the other.
And to give a nice shout out to our prior Games of 2016 podcast, you played Sunset Overdrive last year, which was an Xbox One exclusive.
One of the very few. And I love the damn game. I thought it was wonderful.
And then we both played some Wii U games. We both played the 2 games worth playing on the Wii U.
That's true. The only 2. That's not true. There were like...
The 2 that came out last year, because neither of us got Color Splash, and who knows if we ever will. You probably will.
Fucking Nintendo is recalling... You saw that, right? Nintendo's recalling Wii U's.
Yeah, just yanking them off the shelves, man. Can't get rid of them fast enough.
Don't do that. There are people like me, Nintendo, who have the Switch pre-ordered, but would love to give you $170 for a new Wii U. Like,
there's no way they're selling you a Wii U for $170 when it took them $250 to produce it.
They're recalling the things and putting them in a warehouse for someone to find and sell later in 20 years.
Sell the scrap, keep them and artificially inflate the price. Sell them for $400.
One price cut, one flash shot. I will buy a new Wii U because, like we mentioned last time,
you have an illness.
Absolutely. I am mentally ill. I have a disease.
You gotta feed it.
We said last time, the Wii U is the last really, truly optical media-based system where it's actually reading the disc as you play it. And there are downsides to that. But what that means is in 20 years, when... and this probably won't matter because all those games are coming to Switch, like we said. But in 20 years, when I've got, a teenage kid who I'm like, yo, I'm going to kick your fucking ass at some Smash Bros. And I can hook up my Wii U, an HD system, play with my GameCube controllers, and have... who knows what entertainment's going to look like in 20 years? I'm probably talking out of my ass. We're going to have virtual, television that implant in our eyeballs or whatever.
It's going to be like Minority Report.
Right. Realistically, I'm going to have a modern-ish console, and I'll be able to play these games going forward because they weren't tied to a digital marketplace that doesn't exist. Half the Xbox or PlayStation games, you install them, and then that's just copy protection. The disc is only used to verify that you own the disc. It's totally useless.
To prematurely cut you down at the knees, though, there's already a working Wii U emulator. And in 20 years, you're just going to be playing these games on your computer and you download them off some torrent site.
That's true. But guess what? I'm looking back here at my collection right now.
You'd rather play it on the hardware, and that's totally fair.
A lot of Super Nintendo games down there, buddy, that I could be emulating. I can emulate those like on a calculator.
I want to see that calculator.
Yeah. One thing before we get to Nintendo. One more thing before we get to Nintendo that I found interesting. And I know I want to bring it up because you and I have had many a discourse about... ethics in gaming journalism. So I found this interesting when I was reading my news feed. The headline is, developer admits, quote unquote, we screwed it after game website exposes a review blacklist threat. I guess we should preface this by saying, I think Bethesda made headlines with Doom. They said we're not sending out review copies or codes to anybody. Usually in the past, what that means is their game is really bad.
Especially when the only exposure that they had given that game was the open beta for their multiplayer, which was not made by id Software. It was outsourced, and it was, arguably hot trash.
Yeah, it did not go over well.
Literally, nobody who plays Doom plays the multiplayer.
No. In years prior, Ubisoft doing some really shady stuff with, review embargoes aren't allowed to go up until 24 hours after the game's been out because they don't want people to know what a trash game they made, and they want people to, they want to get those early buyers in and out the door before people realize this is a broken travesty of a game and no one should actually buy it.
Especially with a pre-order, bonus. A lot of those companies try to entice people to, shell out the money first and then ask questions later.
Pre-orders should die. If we're talking software, pre-ordering hardware is one thing. I pre-ordered now 2 Nintendo Switch games only because I'm worried that there's going to be a shortage in my area.
There's not going to be a shortage. There's not going to be a shortage.
I mean, in my area, you never know. What if there's a mad rush?
I'll give you a shortage in your area.
Oh my God. All right. I'm going to go put the B movie on. Get in the mood.
Barry!
God, we're just going to make it a priority to mention the B movie in every podcast moving forward.
Welcome to the B Movie Podcast.
Anyway. So Badfly is the company that sent out these emails. Let me read the email to you, and this is going to be a little long-winded.
Yeah, I've never heard of these people.
Yeah, they are developing, I believe, a shooter called Dead Effect 2. It's a mix, supposedly, of Dead Space and Mass Effect.
Oh, aptly named.
Max Effect.
Mass Space just didn't have the same kind of... didn't sound as right.
Well, that would have been a copyright infringement. MySpace. My name is Tom.
Justin Timberlake would just be knocking down their door.
Oh, yeah, Tom sold years and years ago. And Justin Timberlake, for some reason, owns that. Did you know he's a part owner in the Memphis Grizzlies?
Wow.
Yeah.
Should have put that in the developer info shinfo.
So anyway, the CEO for Badfly, his name is Lubomir Dykist, if I'm saying that right.
I mean, we'll see.
I'm so bad with names. Lubomir. He sent this email out. He says, quote, "Let me just mention one thing, though. This is an indie game which, unfortunately, is very often compared with big budget games, and that's quite a problem and very much damages its reputation in final ratings. Please take into consideration the small team of developers, 11, who just try to develop a good shooter game, and that's about it. Unfortunately, a number of journalists have other, much bigger expectations from it, and that's very damaging for us eventually." All right, okay. I think that's sort of, it's not rude necessarily. I think it's bad bedside manner to mention something like this when you're putting a game out there and giving review codes. I don't think that's... I guess I'm not a journalist, and I'm not a part of the video game industry, so I wouldn't know. But I feel like, based on what I've read, that's not something you usually do, and probably shouldn't do.
Yeah, it sounds just a little bit salty.
I mean, even if he had just mentioned the fact that, hey, we have a small team developing this game, wink, wink, like, that would have been enough. But the fact that he goes on to, like, say, video game journalists, implying that they have some ulterior motive, that seems sketchy. But he continues. "Also, we're working on several other games that are definitely interesting. And if your review preview of Dead Effect 2 is very negative, you won't receive any keys from us in the future."
Wow.
Like, he came out, he just said it, dude.
Okay, I mean, yeah, he's just shooting himself in the foot by doing that. But if you're an indie team of 11 people, you want as much exposure as possible. It doesn't matter if it's positive or negative. Like, let the work speak for itself.
No, mission accomplished then. Like, here we are talking about it. Everyone else is talking about it.
Not in a good way, though.
Yeah.
And, like, this is the kind of negative stuff that's, like, negative about the developer, not negative about the game. You want the thing you make to stand alone. It doesn't matter who made this game. This game is either worth playing or not. And, like, it's nice to take into account how many people made that game, but there are plenty of games in the past 10 years that were made by a tiny team and turned out to be, like, fantastic. He doesn't have to preface anything with that. And then he just goes out and says, well, since we're so, self-sufficient, us and my 11 friends, we don't need you to review our game. And, like, he may be right, but he doesn't have to say it.
Makes you want to punch the fucking guy in the head because, like, you really just said that. Like, you started okay, and then you got a little rough, kind of basically pleading for good reviews. Oh, and then you said, if you don't, like, fuck you. Like, dude, that is so mind-boggling for, I mean, apparently this is a professional. This is a grown man.
He also literally prefaced it by saying, we're not professionals. Like, they're not part of a big studio. They don't have a PR guy. It's the same thing you see with, like, No Man's Sky, where they just did not have any inkling of what to do to, like, communicate their message behind their game and, like, to talk about updates and that kind of stuff. So they just left it completely silent. And this guy is just coming out and he's forward-facing and taking that role and just... He's clearly not up to the task.
Clearly.
And it's really funny. I'll give him just the slightest benefit of the doubt. And, these people that are making these games, they're definitely, they have a vision. They're creative types, they're passionate. So this guy is speaking from his heart, which is not a good idea when you're trying to be marketing your game.
And I know you have thoughts on the whole, should video game companies send out copies for review? And I still think that having your game reviewed is very important. And if you're afraid to have your game reviewed, that says something about your game and about you. Marketing aside, obviously I think it's good marketing if you have a good game and you put it out there weeks in advance and people are talking about it. And I don't just mean conventional news sites. A lot of people aren't going to Polygon and reading long-winded reviews. But games media is evolving. We see it with guys like, IGN's obviously sort of taking a cue from some of their former employees who have split off, the kind of funny guys who they're changing the way the media sort of interacts. It's Twitter, it's Facebook, it's listening to a podcast, it's Twitch,
YouTube.
It's not just, going and reading a review, but it's people talk about your game. And so obviously, Bethesda kind of set a new precedent with that whole thing, and they're not going to be giving out review copies for their games.
I think EA is quietly doing the same thing too, where it's like you get the review copy a day before the game comes out, and that's not necessarily enough time for these bigger review sites to get a deep dive in on it. And I do agree that, places like IGN and Polygon, they are still definitely important. And I think they're more important for smaller studios, like these indie studios that have 11 people, because you don't need a news site to tell you that Dishonored 2 is coming out. You're seeing a commercial for that on TV.
Right.
And you can get the same kind of reviews from literally anyone, but you want that exposure, and that exposure is not necessarily needed for these, gigantic corporations like Bethesda and EA and Ubisoft.
As a consumer, I want to see video game reviews. But that's the thing is, these video game companies don't owe journalists anything. A lot of these journalists are upset about these practices because it's hurting their business. It's hurting their bottom line.
Right.
I don't necessarily care about their bottom line. I don't care about fucking Ubisoft's bottom line. I care about my experience as a consumer. And I care about both of those industries to the point that, if one of them fails, that's going to affect me as a consumer. But, I have no stake in either of them. So I understand sort of the uproar from the journalists, quote unquote journalists. A lot of these people aren't journalists, but you know what I mean. But as a consumer, like I said, I want my reviews. I want 2 weeks or more. I want to watch Let's Plays, and I want to hear what people I trust, whose opinions I trust, years of consuming their content. Like, I trust these people, and if they're telling me this game is not worth playing, hey, maybe I wait till that game takes a price cut. I'm not going to go spend $60 on a game that people aren't enjoying, And so I think on these companies' parts, it's kind of shady to say, yeah, you're not getting a review copy. We don't want our consumers to know anything about this game other than what we choose to reveal. And I think that's really not very, like I said, not consumer friendly.
Like you were saying earlier, people really shouldn't be pre-ordering these games. It's rewarding companies preemptively for a product you don't know that you're going to enjoy. So I don't think we as consumers, we shouldn't be, buying these games day one anyway. Like, it doesn't really matter that companies aren't getting review copies as early as they are. That's hurting them because there's a definite heightened awareness when a game comes out. Like, that's when people are talking about it the most, right? So that's when they're getting the most clicks from Google. It's when they're getting the most views on YouTube. So it's hurting them, but they're going to get that content out eventually because they still want to put that stuff out because it'll be relevant still a week later. It'll just be a little bit less relevant. So we can still, go to IGN and watch a review on the next game from EA or Bethesda, and it's not going to hurt us to wait a week to buy that game.
And that's the root of it is we are all impatient.
We just got to be patient. Got to wait a little bit.
But guess what? A lot of these games we have been waiting for. Again, I'm impatient, knowing that I'm not part of this zeitgeist. Everybody is experiencing something and they're talking about something, and I'm not a part of that. And I'm not often a part of it anyway, because I usually play games a year late.
Yeah, I was going to ask, when was the last time you bought and played a game day and date it came out?
Yeah, it is rare, but it happens a few times a year. And it's nice to be a part of that and to discuss the game and your experiences with other players. But it's I guess more the principle of the matter for someone like me. But this tangibly sort of affects a lot of people. So it's just interesting to see somebody actually come out and threaten verbally, like something we know that companies do. Like Nintendo does this.
We don't know that other companies do this. We know that one small, unprofessional, independent studio has done this.
No, we know there are plenty of first-hand accounts of reputable sites. I'm trying to remember the last major one. I think it actually involved Bethesda. And someone didn't get a Fallout 4 copy because they said something negative about Bethesda. That's where we get into sort of, I don't want to say it's unethical or whatever, but it's really sketchy to me that someone said something that you didn't like, and so you're now cutting them off. It's petty. It's obviously your prerogative, and you have that right. But it's really petty. But we see like Nintendo does the same thing. If you say something bad about them, they're not sending a review copy when the next Pokemon game comes out.
I think it just depends on a case-to-case basis. Like, we don't know exactly what the metric is, like why Bethesda didn't send Fallout 4 to one publication or what. Like, if it's somebody who's just got a beef against Bethesda and they're just trying to write a hit piece on Fallout 4 and they're getting a free copy, like, yeah, Bethesda doesn't have to send them a free copy. If they want to review the game, they can't prevent them from reviewing the game. But they're not entitled to a free copy if their only goal is to just talk shit about it.
But a lot of these developers and a lot of these companies, they interpret anything negative as, these trolls and these blah, blah, blah. Like, no, sometimes people just have an honest opinion and they're gonna be very blunt about the way they feel. Maybe there are people out there who have it out for certain publishers or certain developers.
Yeah, I think it just depends on a case-by-case basis, and it's up to the consumer to decide whether someone's opinion on a game is relevant.
Good for Bethesda then for making a decision to say, we're not going to play the game where we're picking and choosing. It's like, we're just not going to do it because we don't agree with this practice. Fine.
And then they said in a very forward-facing blog post, good on them.
Yeah, and I don't like it because that affects me negatively, but at least they made a decision, and like I said, they're setting a new precedent. But anyway, we've been talking now for fucking ever, and we haven't even gotten to Nintendo yet. I'm going to try to remain positive. I have a few things that really irk me about what happened today.
You're not going to stay positive. You're going to tear into it, and I want you to because I want to hear what you actually think.
Okay.
Because in general, after watching this, I was fairly, this is cool.
I think what they showed, I think. Y'all know it's what I think because I'm saying it.
Okay, what did Nintendo show? Because you haven't even said that.
Nintendo, they had a Fire Emblem Direct today. If you're listening to this, you know that. All three of you. All right, we're going to go in order here.
Hit me.
Fire Emblem Echoes Shadow of Valentia.
What is this?
I don't know if it's a retelling. It's not a remake. I think it's a revisiting of the second Fire Emblem game. Is that right?
Yeah, I believe it was the second one on the Famicom in Japan.
Yeah. And so they're bringing back those two main characters.
What I really liked about what they're talking about from it is that it was kind of an outlier in the Fire Emblem series. Like, you play a Fire Emblem game, you kind of understand what the general thrust of the game is, right?
Right.
But this actually showed you're controlling a character and running around, and then they got into an encounter, which was then the top-down strategy RPG thing, which I thought that was really cool. And I think that it's really good for me because, we never played these Famicom games. So to be able to play it in a way that I'm familiar with, I've played the 3DS, I played Awakening a little bit. So I'm actually kind of excited to pick this game up to get kind of a alternate experience from Fire Emblem. There's actually, you could build certain stats based on how you wanted to build your character. And I played Dark Souls, and I like that.
You have a little more customization.
So instead of just getting random, I leveled up, so sometimes I get a lot of buffs, and sometimes I only get better attack. It takes a little bit of the randomness from it.
Right.
Which I appreciate.
So that is something I think is really great. In this, kind of the running thing of this whole, what is inevitably going to turn into a rant on my part, is everything they showed looked really fucking great. All of it. Even the Koei Tecmo crossover. That looked awesome. I'm going to buy it. So anyway, we'll get there. But Shadows of Valentia, it does look really great. I appreciate that they're kind of branching out while staying true to the core of what Fire Emblem is. And let me just say, I am so fucking glad. We had a Fire Emblem specific Direct where we had 4 new Fire Emblem games announced. 4 years ago, this franchise was dead. It was dead. Nintendo, they axed the whole fucking thing. Fire Emblem Awakening was it. That was the end. And it did phenomenally. It sold over 1 million copies on the 3DS, and it revived the franchise. And as someone who has played every Fire Emblem game that's been translated and released in America, that is fucking great. I am just so happy about that. So I'm inherently, my disposition is not a negative one. I am glad this is happening. We got 4 games. They all looked awesome. I'm very happy about that. Here's my fucking beef, Nick. Here's my fucking beef. Is they come out with this Direct. I'm sitting here in class today, right? I'm sitting here doing some 3D modeling, trying to pay attention to what my professor's saying, watching this Direct. I have this kid next to me kind of stank a little bit, kind of got over and was trying to watch the Direct next to me and is asking me questions, and I'm trying to do all these things, and I'm like, oh my God, that's Fire Emblem. Is that Lucina? Oh my God. I was just freaking out, okay? Okay, and I couldn't hear half of what was being said, so I was like, is this Switch gameplay? That looks really good. Is that Switch? I was freaking out. But no, guess what happened? They jumped into Echoes. They jumped into freaking 3DS. Available on 3DS family of systems. Seriously? You have a brand new console launching in 6 weeks? And you're announcing a game that's coming out on fucking 6-year-old hardware? I know they've said, these are our two pillars, you know. They're going to exist alongside each other, and we're not going to abandon the 3DS. Fuck you. Abandon the 3DS. It's been 6 years. You have a new console. Your last home console is a complete and utter failure. It died. All right. DOANOA. Like, what the fuck are you doing? And so for them to come out and say, we're going to release a game on fucking 3DS instead of the Switch blew me away. I was so, my fist clenched up into a ball, and I was like, this is so like Nintendo. And I know this game's been in development for way longer than we probably think. How difficult would it have been to port this game and just announce it as a Switch game? And that, for a small sect of people, that right there is reason to buy the Switch. Where in a way that none of the other launch titles, or even any of the titles announced in the first year, you know, are able to do. Oh, but guess what they did? Guess what they fucking did? They came out and no gameplay, no flashy graphic, just some generic typeface that said Fire Emblem Switch 2018, just to placate all of you loyal customers who are going to go out and drop $500 on launch day to buy our fucking ill-conceived console that's going to totally fail because we're doing everything wrong again. Gah!
See, I didn't get that immediate anger like you did. I saw it and I was like, okay, this is a 3DS game. I didn't have to think that hard to remember, oh yeah, Nintendo said something about, you know, supporting the 3DS line of systems for like another year or two. So I think this is not the last game that you're going to be seeing on the 3DS alone. There's definitely got to be at least one more, like big, you know, tentpole launch on the 3DS before they're finally axing it. And you saw this with the Game Boy Advance bleeding over into the DS life cycle because they prematurely released the DS because of the PSP, you know, blah, blah, blah.
But it had the backwards compatibility, so they could still
have the backwards compatibility, but that doesn't really matter because you're still developing a game that uses one screen and it's 160 by 240 and it's much, much weaker than what the DS can do. And it's not you're not selling a DS to play a Game Boy Advance game when there's 80 million Game Boy Advances in the wild, right? So it's just they're just continuing to support it because they said they would, and there are still 60 million people that have 3DSs, and they're not necessarily buying, you know, a Switch to play a port of a 3DS game. Nobody would do that.
Here's the thing. They wouldn't have had to say that Echoes was a port. If they would have just announced it as a Switch game, that would have been great. I expected a Nintendo or a Fire Emblem Fates port, you know, with all the DLC included, with full HD graphics and you know, all beautified or whatever. I expected that, didn't get it. I think that would have been a great move. Say the Switch is launching with a port of a game we got last year. There were a lot of people who didn't play that game. I own the game and I only played like 9 chapters. I would love to buy an HD version of that game. Okay? But they didn't give us anything about the Switch. Like, just anything. Like that whole trailer they showed for Fire Emblem Heroes, which we'll get to. Like, that looked beautiful. And it, you know, of course it said not actual gameplay, but I was like, show that and then put Fire Emblem Switch. Like, Nintendo, you are inevitably going to disappoint us. At least lie to us. Like, we know you do that. Why couldn't they have done it here? Why couldn't they have shown that and said that, you know, that not actual gameplay, whatever, but this is the trailer, and then put FE Switch 2018. That would have gotten me hyped. But seeing just this little boring generic typeface and little black font on a bland white border, it's coming, don't worry. And then you just move on to the next thing.
I think they had to say something, and they didn't necessarily have to make a mock-up of fake footage to say we're working on it. They didn't have to do that.
They didn't have to, but they should have done something more, is what I'm saying.
And if they didn't say anything about them working on a Fire Emblem game for Switch, then people would have been even more mad.
Yeah, I mean, they had to mention it. I just think it should have been in a larger capacity. Oh, yeah, they couldn't have gotten away without mentioning it. Fire Emblem Warriors.
So we got a little more gameplay. We got a cool little scene of Chrom just kicking a whole horde of dudes right in the booty hole. Those big angry Falchion, however you pronounce that.
Falcon? I thought it was fucking.
I don't know.
Falcon?
It's got the CH, so I'm going to say Falchion.
Falchion.
And, it's Warriors gameplay. It looked like a better Hyrule Warriors. Thought it looked like it might have a better visual capacity than the Wii U had with Hyrule Warriors. So, I don't know. I mean, I haven't really played a Warriors game before. I played a little bit of your copy of Hyrule Warriors, but I might buy this. I don't know.
Yo, it looked wonderful. Graphically, I think it's beautiful. Fire Emblem characters. I think this game is primed to do, or it's positioned to do very well. Bandai, is it Bandai? No, Koei Tecmo. They're still making Warriors games every other year. They're putting out these games consistently and have now for years and years and years. So the games are doing well. There's a market for it. I thought Hyrule Warriors, I think, was a really great game. And people don't give it credit. No one played it because no one owns a Wii U, but it was part love letter to Zelda fans, where they took aspects of every Zelda game and all of Zelda lore, kind of crafted this wholly unique narrative using all of these elements. And I haven't beaten a lot of the Zelda games, so a lot of it was like new to me. But the stuff I did recognize and have experienced before, I said, oh man, that's really clever how they utilize that. And that was also my first Dynasty Warriors game. So, the gameplay, it gets repetitive. That's kind of the nature of those games. But I was really sort of happy to learn that there are these strategy elements. You're not just going around and killing things. It is a more nuanced game. There is more depth and complexity to it. Fire Emblem, you're basically taking Dynasty Warriors and then giving us characters we give a shit about. Not that Zelda didn't. Zelda did, but a lot of those characters didn't translate to the Dynasty Warriors formula as well.
Every single character in every Fire Emblem game translates to that formula very well. It's all hand-to-hand, like swords and axes and spears combat. I could see, this could just be like the total mashup that people want. You're going to see characters from the entire franchise, and it's going to be cool.
We went to the Fire Emblem Heroes website, and like just that splash screen of who is on that. Just Ike and obviously Roy and Marth. Chrom is on there.
Lucina, got Corrin, got Lynn from Fire Emblem, the first US game, and they're introducing new characters in that. I wonder if there's going to be any new characters in Fire Emblem Warriors.
I can't imagine they wouldn't do something earth-shattering like that.
They might. Who knows? We don't know.
I think it's more likely that we get a new character introduced in Fire Emblem Heroes. Probably more likely.
Which was the thing that they talked about after Fire Emblem Warriors?
Yeah, it's the mobile game, the long-awaited mobile game. And let me just say, I don't know if I have said anything about it on the podcast, but I have been so, all my friends ask me, you excited for it?
You've been sweating. You've been so worried.
I said, no, I'm not fucking excited. This is going to be an abortion, and we all know it. It's going to be Pet My Waifu.
You would play that game.
Well, I'm not saying I wouldn't, but that's not the game I want. To be fair, I didn't pet anybody in Fire Emblem Fates. That's not what I'm into. I want to play a freaking tactical RPG.
And they showed that.
Dude, I was blown away. This actually looked like a Fire Emblem game. Kudos to Nintendo for doing one thing right. And this game could totally suck for all we know, but
it looks really cool. I'm the only thing I'm marginally worried about is how they're implementing the pay-as-you-go kind of system. I don't want to feel like I'm locked too much out without, shoveling over a few dollars, which I inevitably will, because I can see myself really being like, oh, I really want to unlock Roy. I really want to unlock Ellawood. I want Hector. I want Lynn. So I'm a little bit marginally concerned about that, but just from what they've shown, looks like a really satisfying game loop. It's a little bit, watered down as far as the the weapon triangles go. The rock, paper, scissors elements they have with the sword and the axe and the spear. I think that they had to water that down a little bit. You only have like 4 characters on your team at once, but then they showed like the characters you can choose from, and there was like 20 guys that they're just like, oh, I want this one and this one. And that's so cool. That's always the hardest part about playing those games. It seemed very fully featured for a mobile game.
It's interesting to me how they're implementing the battle system. Instead of grinding, building a team, grinding up your stats, and going through the story, you are summoning these heroes, Fire Emblem heroes. You're summoning these characters from Fire Emblem past. You're kind of building a who's who, this superstar team of your own choosing. And so they have these orbs that you earn or you can buy. And I think that's going to be a major hindrance to the game. This game's going to, it's going to sell, or people are going to download it. It's going to be a huge game. But the Japanese model they're using kind of thing, that's really going to hurt it. I was even looking at pricing. like 140 orbs for $75 to some, and you needed an orb to summon a character to play. These are the kind of games you hear, a couple times a year. There's an article where some teenage kid spent $3,000 on a game, or some crazy Japanese man spent 10 grand on a iPhone lottery game, or whatever. It's like these gameplay loops that rope you into spending all this money. And obviously we have that here, right? A lot of our games do that pay to play sort of, or pay to win.
Almost every big mobile game is a free to play, and then with microtransactions. And I don't think it's inherently negative. It can leave a lot of people with a sour taste in their mouth, but I think it's just primarily how it's implemented. And if it's too, parasitic and boring to play without paying, then that can be kind of annoying. But we'll just have to see how they implemented it here. Like I know they avoided that with Super Mario Run, but it seems like they were building it like that from the start, and then they kind of switched gears later in the development. So you still see like elements where it could have been pay to play. But I think they were smart with Super Mario Run in particular to be a pay once and then you've got the full thing. And I think Fire Emblem definitely lends itself more to that style of pay as you go.
I've harped on Nintendo's decision with Super Mario Run where they're charging a fixed price. It's actually not that I have a problem with. I have a problem with how much it was. This looks like a game that I would spend $10 on for the mobile experience, because I'm getting essentially a full-fledged Fire Emblem game with me wherever I go. And, Super Mario Run, I think, is really great for what it is. And it's much more complex than people give it credit for. I think there's I still haven't beaten it, and I play it almost every day. There's a lot there. And I don't even necessarily disagree that $10 was a fair price. Like, maybe it was. Again, it's the principle of the matter is kind of having established, a set way of doing things. Kind of the inherent differences between gaming on a phone, a non-dedicated device, versus gaming on a console or a handheld. $10, I just said, Nintendo, you can't come in here and try and change this. Like, there's a way it works. Either fall neatly into that, or don't and suffer. And they suffer because that game had a terrible conversion rate.
Had a terrible conversion rate, but they were making $10 on every conversion. So if they had twice as much, but they charged $3 for it, then they're not making money off that. I think Nintendo made enough. So I don't think they poured millions of dollars in resources into making this game either. So I think it's more of them kind of testing the waters, seeing what their margins are going to be looking like in the future. And that's beneficial to them. It's beneficial for us. And we'll see with this Fire Emblem game, which I was thinking that I might be worried for like the other shoe to drop, like waiting for the bad news to come out afterwards. Like, oh, you have to be online all the time. But I don't think they're going to do that, because the main reason they did that for Mario Run was a DRM thing. Like, they wanted people to not pirate that game. But this is a free game anyway. So unless they're pirating and like hacking the game to give you like fake orbs, then you're not pirating anything anyway. So yeah, that I think this is not going to be an online all the time kind of thing either. So that's going to assuage a lot of people's concerns that they had with the Mario Run kind of fiasco that was.
Yeah, fiasco game. I don't know how many millions of dollars they made on that game.
Well, I think they had to have made. I think, God, I had that number in my head, but they made millions on this thing.
So moving on, more Nintendo Switch news. Just a few little things, some of which may matter, some of which may not matter. I don't know. But before we get into it, I just want to preface it with, if you're listening to this, you know my frustration with Nintendo, and specifically the Switch, but going back, Wii U, even the Wii, despite its success, there seems to be this disconnect between Nintendo, the video game developers, and Nintendo, the business, their investors and their financial advisors, and even obviously even the marketing. There's no cohesion there. And I don't know if this is just a byproduct of sort of Nintendo's traditional sort of ways, or it's just how they've cultivated their company, or what it is. I don't know. They have this very narrow field of view and this very sort of old-fashioned mindset, and they keep doing these things that seem so out of touch. And I keep saying out of touch. It seems that way. It's like they don't understand what everybody else understands. Everybody else in the industry. And for years, almost a decade now, it's 2017, almost a decade, we've been saying this is what Nintendo needs to do to resonate with the everyday gamer. The Wii was a success, but Gamers hated that machine. And Nintendo continues to chase lightning in a bottle instead of just doing what they need to do, listening to their consumers, and really do what they need to do to catch up to the rest of the industry. You go back to 2002 with the original Xbox. There's just a list of benchmarks that Nintendo has refused to acknowledge and haven't come close to hitting that are now commonplace. And I think they need an infusion of young blood in there. You know what I mean? They need to bring in anybody who understands the current industry and the current market.
Well, I've got 2 counterpoints already to what you said. Okay, so you said third time they're trying to capture lightning in the bottle. I'd say it's their 5th time, if you count the DS and 3DS. So you got the Wii, the Wii U, DS, 3DS. Those are all like gimmicky kind of versions of what they could have been. But 3 out of those were pretty much great successes. Even the 3DS is a huge success if you compare it to how the Vita sold, which is its only competition in the market. So I would say that they have more reasons than not to think that a gimmicky console will succeed for them versus a powerful console. And then you also said they didn't have enough like younger people in the company forward facing. And that's what the whole Switch presentation was. You had the guy that came out, he's like, I'm the lead director of the Switch, and he's the one that was introducing 1-2 Switch. He had the kind of funny sweater underneath his tan business suit. That's a young dude. Like, that dude was like late 20s, early 30s. Koizumi, who was leading the whole presentation, he had never been a like direct guy before, but then he comes out and he kills it. He's got that cool Mario hat on. He's just eating up the scenery, and like that was fantastic. The guy coming out was like introducing Splatoon. That's a young guy. Like they are now pushing forward. Like they had Kimishima, and that was his first kind of thing as the president there. But then they had this young dude, and then like all-star developers for Japan. You know, they had Suda51, who's the guy behind No More Heroes, and they had that terrible interpreter fiasco. Like that was rough, but he's a wacky guy. Like, and then the guy behind the Yakuza series, and he just comes out, he's menacing looking, but like they really did put forth a huge, for Nintendo, focus on these younger developers and these younger innovators in the company itself.
How much of that is an attempt to market themselves to a younger, hipper audience, knowing that not only are we trying to please investors here, which is typically why you see just the old man in the suit talking about how, you know, blandly, as vanilla as possible, this is how this is going to revolutionize the industry. You know, they made an effort, not a strong one, but they made the effort. They brought out these younger people, and they're trying to speak to us. They're making an attempt. But Nintendo isn't being run by these people. They still have these older people, very traditional fellas running this. But here's the thing. Their investors, they want to see green. They want to see dollar signs, okay? They have a very different perspective and a very different outlook and a very different set of expectations. So when they say, we want to see X amount of dollars, and we want to see this move this many units and blah, blah, blah. Just the whole thing with the Switch coming out and saying it's $300. But it's got this HD rumble and all these things that they think people want to hear. They think these are the reasons they're going to be successful. We all know it. Your consumers know it. The rest of the industry knows it. We've been talking about it for years. How come you don't know it? Your investors are sitting here saying, this is what we demand. There's a consensus on what you need to do to just make the attempt to join the fucking 21st century, okay? And here's the thing. I keep saying, like, you know, these traditional older, you know, I think a lot of what they do works really well for them, right? But like we said last time, there's this disconnect even between Nintendo of America and Nintendo Japan, where NOA just serves as marketing and translation, right? Be you, Nintendo. Do what you do and the way you've done it, but don't be so... They seem so resistant to, I mean, any outside influence. They seem so staunchly against. They want to do it their way, and any suggestion as to otherwise is like an insult to them. It's like they are deeply morally offended when they hear, you know, this outside criticism. I didn't articulate that well, but you know what I'm saying?
I know what you're saying, and I understand that you want Nintendo to move more towards a closer to like what Xbox and Sony is doing, but at the same time, even Microsoft isn't really succeeding in that market. So I think it's kind of boiling down to, you don't need like 2 or 3 consoles that are in parity with each other. They each need to have something that brings people in, and Nintendo has that with their games, and with their quirky little gimmicks that they incorporate. And I really wouldn't want Nintendo to completely abandon these cool little things they're doing. Like if the Switch was just, a PS4, that would be a lot less cool to me than a handheld that you can plug into your TV, and it's got these wacky little wands that can fill with water and they feel like an ice cube cup. And that I don't know, that still speaks to me.
But most people, it doesn't to most people.
But I don't care about most people. I'm caring about myself when I'm watching this thing. And I'm hearing about the Switch, and I want Nintendo to succeed, but I don't think this is going to be a drastic failure like a lot of people do. I think they'll probably do better than the Wii U still, because the Switch is much more compelling than the Wii U.
It really is. Oh, in every way, I think.
Even price-wise, it's cheaper than the Wii U was at launch.
I think you absolutely need more than one console. Like, we need the competition. But again, with the console twins, it's, PS4 is obviously pulled away. So it comes down to you need not only competitive hardware, but you need good games. And Microsoft, they did hardly any exclusives last gen anyway. They had 10 years and they had 4 exclusive franchises, and Sony had like 40, So there's a huge difference there. If Nintendo were to bring themselves up to speed with everything else, we're talking online infrastructure, hardware, it'd be Sony versus Nintendo.
But it takes a long time for online infrastructure to get up and running and to actually work well. Xbox Live started in 2002, and it wasn't until like 2006, 2007 when it actually started getting good. PS3 had it free from the beginning, but there was that huge hack in 2011. They had to get their shit together for a long time.
Those are two separate components.
Those are two separate things, but those are the two examples that I have.
Right.
What examples do you have of a company just being like, oh yeah, internet, let me just flip the switch and then it works? It's a lot harder than that.
Switch.
But I'm hoping that Nintendo, because they are working with a third-party company, DNA, D-E-N-A. Yeah, DNA, to set up their online services, and they've made considerable steps compared to where we were, 5 years ago.
Dude.
So I think that is a good sign, and we'll see more when they finally announce what the pricing is going to be like, and what the UI and the way you interact with your friends with the device itself, and how the app works. If the app is a smooth experience, then sure, that's going to be fine. It's not like I voice chat with people anyway, and it's a big pain in the ass to try and type a message to someone with an Xbox 360 controller or a PS4 controller or whatever. Nobody wants to do that.
A lot of people use the voice chat, and the fact that I need a separate device, I need my cell phone here, and I need to pay Nintendo for the right to take my phone and call somebody. That's crazy.
Can you voice chat on PS4 without having PS Plus?
Yes, absolutely. All you need is a set of headphones.
How many people want to buy another headset?
It's not proprietary. Any headset.
And I also am just saying, voice chat, I don't think really matters as much as people are throwing their fists in the air and screaming to the gods about not having voice chat on a Nintendo console.
That's part of the problem. They need to not appeal to Nintendo fans. They need to appeal as a dedicated gaming device for everybody. It's not a Nintendo console. It's a video game console.
Nobody would be swayed by saying, oh yeah, the system has voice chat. That's not selling anybody. That's not going to be oh, finally, now I can buy this thing. Nobody is saying that.
That's bullshit. The people not saying that are the 12 million people who already own Wii U's. But the other 80 million people who own a current gen system, they look at this and say, well, why would I want to buy this? It's a kiddie toy. It doesn't do any of the things that a video game console should be doing and has been doing since 2002. Are you kidding me? These are integral to a thriving online community, and that's the reason video game consoles exist anymore. If it weren't for online, we wouldn't be where we are today. Video games would not be the same.
You've got 6 other devices to do that on.
It's the principle of the matter, Nick.
It's a stupid principle.
When those other people don't buy that video game console, it will affect me as it has for the last 4 years since I've owned a Wii U. That's what it comes down to, is it all comes back to bite those of us in the ass. Those of us who combined, we're about to go drop $1,000, a freaking pretty penny on the Switch, on the accessories on launch day, only to be rewarded with Nintendo saying, sorry, we fucking failed again.
But we don't know that.
We'll make it up to you next generation. At some point, what is the straw that's going to break the camel's back?
I don't think Netflix is that straw, and I don't think voice chat is that straw either.
Dude, voice chat, you're giving it a total discredit to like how important that is to people.
I am, because I've never used it and I've never wanted to use it, because whenever I hear people talking, I immediately go to any setting I can to mute them, because I do not want to hear other people talk to me, no matter how cooperative the game is. It's just shitty little children screaming about how they fucked my mom.
But can you... Oh, God.
I don't need to hear that.
Like... Call of Duty would have failed with that voice chat. Overwatch would not be the game of the year if you couldn't speak to your opponents or to your teammates. It just wouldn't work. And guess what? You're not getting a game like that on the Switch. It's not happening.
Hey, but Splatoon didn't have voice chat.
And that was a fucking travesty.
But that was still a rousing success.
A rousing success by what metric? The fact that...
That's a beloved new IP? I think that's a great success.
Yeah, it's beloved among Nintendo fans, but nobody played it because no one owned a Switch.
Wow, it's beloved among the Nintendo fans? You mean the people that owned a Wii U and were actually capable of playing that game? How weird.
Well, guess what? Nintendo isn't going to exist as a company if they're only appealing to 12 million people every fucking 5 years. Again, Nintendo is doing everything they can to shoot themselves in the foot, and if the Switch succeeds, which I hope it does, it will be in spite of everything they've done.
I can think of 10 things they could have done worse.
Well, I can think of fucking at least 70 things I could have done better, or done it all. Done at all.
I don't believe that at all.
Well, you, my friend, are in the minority, and that's fine. But again, I'm looking at these things... I know when we argue and we have these, this discourse is, we are very like-minded. I'm going to get my money's worth out of this thing, just like when I said when I got the Wii U. If all I ever play is fucking Wind Waker, Smash Bros. And Mario Kart, that thing is paid for itself 10 times over. So I'm totally on board with you. But I have to look at it as if I am not only a casual fan, but just a third party who isn't as invested, because when they're not interested, the console fails, and that affects me. I got the Wii U, and I think there are a lot of great games on it, and we're going down this fucking hole again. I'm just ranting about the Wii U again. I love the system. I think it's fucking great for what it is. I think there are a lot of flaws. It's a terribly flawed system. I mean, just don't get me started on that. It is flawed in almost every way, but as a consumer, I really hurt by the fact that Nintendo couldn't manage to sell this thing. And so if it happens with the Switch, it's just going to be another expensive, it's going to be a money pit. I understand my frustration. I understand that I'm pulling a Nick and playing devil's advocate here. But also, these things should matter to any invested Nintendo fan. It should matter.
Yeah, and I think it matters to an extent, but I don't think it's the make or break. These little things, like, it's just little, like, it's a little hornet, stinging you. And it's like, ooh, that hurts, but it's not going to kill you, Can
you imagine if we said, like, fucking 5 years ago when they announced the Wii U or whatever? Oh my God, it's 2017. They announced the Wii U in 2011?
And it came out 2012, so that system is now... That was a winter... Was it winter 2012? Yeah, 4.5 years old.
We'd be saying the same things back then. We'd say, oh, the controller and fucking, oh, there's no Netflix and oh, there's no voice. Like, we'd say, that doesn't matter. That doesn't matter. It's little things. They have Nintendo games.
When people are just like shouting about this little thing that I don't really care about personally, then I'm like, why are you mad? Why are you mad about them introducing voice chat even though it's on your phone? Like, yeah, that might suck, but what if it's a lot better than you were expecting?
I know, again, you don't care about these things, but a lot of people do. And based on the reactions on the internet, trolling forums and Twitter and, I don't want to say analysts, because they're not analysts. They're assholes who talk about games.
Analysts.
Anal cysts.
Ooh.
Gnarly.
Deep cut.
Anal switch.
Mm.
I'd play that.
My.
No, thank you. We're gonna try to not do this next time we record. Is go down the shithole of the Switch hole.
It's the deep dark pit of complaints and anger. It's very sad. But then, as soon as I watch like gameplay of ARMS, I watch people playing Super Bomberman in 2017 on this new system. That hype just builds up in me. I'm like, I'm so giddy at the same. Oh man, I can't not be excited about this.
I caved in and pre-ordered 1-2 Switch.
Did you watch that Breath of the Wild trailer in English?
No, I have to go check it out.
The Japanese one was pretty Japanese, but like the voices, I thought I might be kind of weird about it at first because, first time for voice acting in a Zelda game, but dude, it made me like tear up. It's moving. That music, Zelda, just like she fucked up and she's so sad and I am sad too.
Well, hey, real quick, we've got to wrap this up here, like 10 minutes ago. But real quick, earlier we were talking, and you said there was something about Stardew Valley coming to the Switch. The developer for Stardew Valley came out and said that it will not be a launch title, but he's doing his best to get it on the Switch later in the year. What was that you were reading? That you wouldn't let me read?
Okay, yeah, that was an official statement from God, what is that developer name? Concerned Ape. This is that funny guy, cool name for his company. Yeah, he's making Stardew Valley for the Switch. It's not coming out at launch. I don't even know when it's coming out on the systems. That's already out on PS4, right?
It's out on PS4 and Xbox One. Yeah.
Okay, so I think who knows how long that's going to take to port over. It's just one guy, but
I think he has been working with third party company to port the games. He's not doing it himself.
Great. Yeah. I'm happy about that. It means quicker turnaround. I just wanted to kind of related to that and related to some gripes that you've had in the past. I wanted to bring up to you that it's been confirmed that limited run games are going to be doing Switch games also.
Yeah.
And I wanted to get a little bit of your take on your experience, trying to acquire these games. So
I have a fundamental issue with a company like limited run games, and I'm just going to try to rush through this since you've got to get to work. But a fundamental issue with them, whereas companies like, oh God, why can't I IndieBox, fucking great company. They're taking these games that never got physical releases, and they're making these beautiful box sets. These wonderful box sets. And now, guess what happens? Those box sets sell out. They become limited. What happens? They come out and release the Steelbook series. And you can just buy these little, you get soundtrack, you get a fully illustrated manual, wonderful pieces. Even if it's not, the special edition, they at least recognize that, hey, people still want physical copies of these games. So we're going to go back to the drawing board and we're going to produce a new version of it that you can go buy for a reasonable price. I just bought freaking Guacamelee for the second time physically and Rogue Legacy for $20 a pop. Like, that is perfectly reasonable. And soundtrack, manual, steelbook case, beautiful. As a collector, I love that. Limited run is bullshit. I know their name is Limited Run, but fuck those guys, because I know the first thing on their frequently asked questions list is, oh, your website doesn't work. Your website is broken. I lost out on my game I had in my cart. And their first thing they say is, well, when 25,000 people want to come and try to buy a product at the same time, for which we only have 5,000 of, ... And I'm like, fuck you, dude. If you know there are 25,000 people who want your copy or a copy of your product, make 25,000 copies of that product. Okay? Don't force this fucking fake collector's market where instantly these games are being scalped on eBay for $100 a pop or more. Make 25,000 copies if 25,000 people want it. And guess what happens? If 30,000 people want it, make 30 fucking thousand copies. These should not, your website should not be crashing every month when these go on sale, and I should be able to, as a consumer, go and buy your product without any fucking hassle. I mean, that is ridiculous to me. So, yay, they're going to be making Switch games, and I'm sure a lot of my favorite games are going to be coming to the Switch, and I won't be able to buy any of them, because fuck that company. I'm salty. I'm really salty. Shout out to IndieBox. You guys are fucking awesome. I love the way you guys do things, and I've given you plenty of money, and I will continue to do so. Wonderful guys over there.
To massage that just a small amount, I want to give Limited Run just a small fair chance and say it's just two dudes that are hitting up these companies, and we don't know what their back-end costs are. We don't know what the licensing mumbo-jumbo they have to go through like the publishers and the developers and all that kind of stuff. And they've already not been able to release games physically because of them being seen as competition from other publishers. And I find that to be like, they're doing what they think is like good for that market. And I think you're just kind of on the cusp of that collector market where you're not willing to shell out $100 for these things, but there are people who are, and they would be upset if there was like a second run of, say, Guacamelee that they paid $100 for, and they can be like, okay, this is good. I have this item. It holds value because there is a set quantity of them. And if there was more introduced, then that would hurt my value.
Maybe in retrospect, yeah, like you go out and release a copy of Saturday Morning RPG and you sell it for $15. Yeah, people who went on eBay and spent $100+, they're going to be butthurt. But guess what? Like, don't support the gray market. And if you're a scalper, fuck you and fuck your family too, because you are everything that is wrong with this fucking industry. And you are intentionally going out of your way to squeeze fucking happiness and joy out of someone else's life. Fuck you. But I get that aspect. I get it. And as a collector, as someone who's spent lots of money, more money than I should have on a number of items, like, I get it. But again, if it were available for me to buy in the first place, like, that wouldn't be a concern. Like, make 30,000 of them, and everyone in the world who wants one has one.
But then it wouldn't be limited.
I don't give a shit. That's such an artificial...
I'm just saying, they're two different parts of a similar community for the collectors, right? You may not appreciate their business model, but there are people who do. So it's a bummer that they can't be released on limited and on, indie box and have different, SKUs, have different boxes. Like the limited run comes with like a cool, like, signed pamphlet. It's got, limited, like, art assets that you don't get to see, and make it a physical worth. But as it stands, it's more of a quantity versus quality thing, which I get why you're angry. I'm just trying to give you a little bit of my perspective into it from the outside. Even
websites like Fangamer have, like, done it better.
Their thing isn't about collectability, though. That's not the hinge upon which they are making themselves unique.
Sure, and again, that's why I think it's just a bullshit, artificial sort of. It's just a dumb mission statement. Like, we're going to go out of our way to intentionally, like, and again, I don't think it's a licensing thing. Like, IndieBox has been able to consistently do it, and they
IndieBox is probably a bigger company in general, though.
It's two guys. They're the same thing. They do things. Obviously, they're a subscription service, or whatever. But it's two guys. Just the way that limited run is.
If they have a more consistent income, then they aren't, like, investing what they earn. But this feels like it might be more of like okay, we spent $20,000 to make these 5,000 games, and now we've got $100,000 off selling of them, and then that goes into brokering deals and making more of these games, and there's got to be a lot more on the back end that you don't know about.
That's fair enough. There likely is, but at the end of the day, if someone wanted to make it happen, it would happen.
Yeah, and these markets breed competition, so we'll see if that comes up, if that's worth the competition, which I don't see happening because there are companies like Fangamer and IndieBox and Limited Run.
Well, fingers crossed that I have a little better luck with the Switch.
I just want a physical release of, like, Fast RMX. That seems like a cool game that I want to buy.
Yeah, there are a lot of games that deserve physical releases.
Snipper clips. I want physical snipper clips.
Word on the street is that Nintendo is moving away from physical media based on production numbers of various things, and that sucks. It costs nothing to make physical media. Anyway, this has been the Console Crusade podcast. Thanks for listening to me becoming irrationally irate. We'll see you fucking next time.
Whoop.
Your end has come!